Hold on. All right. So today is our May voter skills training, and we are joined today by two amazing women. That Nicole Watkins is from the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, also known as ADAP, and she joined ADAP in 2022, and she is the Senior Voting Rights Advocate and Outreach Coordinator for ADAP. And their work revolves around voter education, voting rights, voting laws in Alabama, voting with a disability, and outreach and communications. Nikki was born with spina bifida and has been a lifelong disability advocate, and they have a BA and an MA in history from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and they taught history at Lawson State College, community college, for several years before becoming a professional advocate, first at Planned Parenthood Southeast, and now working as a peer advocate in the independent living field. After she talks, then we're going to hear from Melissa Jackowski, who is the National Director and Field Strategy for Vote, Run, Lead, Action organization. And Melissa's career spans nearly 2 decades working with unions, political parties, and nonprofit corporations, organizing for candidate, issue, and ballot initiative campaigns. And as a political consultant in Las Vegas, Nevada for 9 years, Melissa worked on campaigns ranging from community level organizing up through a presidential field direction. And so she previously served as the grassroots advocacy manager for the Alabama Association of University Women before joining the Target Smart Communications family in early 2015, and ultimately transitioning to Real Strategies, where she has helmed the primary full-service vendor team responsible for the independent expenditures and issue mobilization operations of one of the largest trade associations in the United States, in addition to overseeing the department responsible for its member advocacy. And so her decades of advocacy for women in politics has led to her current position as National Director Field Strategy for Vote, Run, Lead, Action. And so today's going to be a super interesting meeting, and I'm really looking forward to it being part of a transformation of voter turnout for Alabama. And so I'm going to hand it off first to Nikki, and then when she's done, we'll have a brief question and answer, and then we'll switch over to Melissa. And so, Nikki, I'm going to spotlight you, and then
Fun.
if,
I'm Nikki, and I just wanted to say I'll talk a little bit about ADAP in a second, but I'm joined on this call by my colleague and legal director, Larry Canada, and Zoom thinks he's me. And I've realized it's because I put the Zoom link from my registration into the calendar invite. So that is my fault and not poor Larry's. Larry is not my twin as much as I adore Larry. But the reason I mention Larry is because I am not an attorney. I work as an advocate and I do a lot of trainings like this one. But if you do have questions that are related to ongoing, well, you have to be careful about ongoing lawsuits. But if you have questions about legal action or particularly questions related to federal law or state law that I might not be able to answer, Larry has kindly joined us as well. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. If you see another Nicole Watkins in Zoom, that is Larry and not me. um, tell you a little bit about what ADAP
I'm
does.
sorry, just one sec. I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves if you're not Nikki. Then
Let
okay, thanks.
me move that. Can you all see that okay? Okay. I'll talk a little bit about voting and everything that goes into it in Alabama, particularly from a disability perspective. But to tell you a little bit about what we do at ADAP, so Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program is part of the protection and advocacy system that receives federal funding. And these protection and advocacy agencies or systems were created after a series of horrors were unveiled at mental institutions around the country and the mistreatment of people with disabilities in those institutions. And we have people that offer different types of services and have different areas of expertise, right? Like I work with people who have expertise in Medicaid waivers or healthcare or uh, the Department of Mental Health. We have a team of civil rights attorneys that are incredible and offer free legal services to people with disabilities related to disability rights issues. So it is an amazing organization that is at the moment at risk of losing federal funding come the congressional budget at the end of this fiscal year. So we shall see, right? But it's worth a mention. And what I do, of course, is voting rights work. And part of my mandate comes from the Help America Vote Act, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I think a lot of folks on the call have probably heard of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and kind of know what it is, right? Or you really know what it is if you've spent a lot of time with it or with someone with a disability. The Help America Vote Act, HAVA, is a little bit of a lesser known piece of legislation, but that's also the reason why we all have voting machines in every polling location and why we have mandated polling locations to be accessible in specific ways for people with disabilities. So that's where my work originates. My work originates from anyway. And like Kathy mentioned, I also do outreach and communications work. I write our newsletter. I really enjoy doing a lot of the, the social media aspects of this work. And there's a lot of overlap, right? But just to help you understand a little bit about what I do. I go around the state. I'm based in Birmingham, even though our office is based in Tuscaloosa. So I go all over and up and down the state. And the part of what I do is exactly this. What y'all are going to hear is similar to what I've told other folks before, and you may have heard me speak about it before too. Sometimes if we get lucky, and Kathy will know we had a great success with this, we'll train a bunch of election workers on these issues so people have a better understanding of disability rights at the polls. And a lot of the time, which is just as important, we're training people in schools, or I'll go to a community center, or I'll talk to a group of people, at a resource fair, the Selma Jubilee, just a bunch of different places, just to talk to them about all the different things that go into voting, right? Voter registration, ID, and then your rights as a person with a disability. So that's a little bit about what I do. And then I'll actually go into how all this works. And so, some of this information, because we've got a lot of folks on the call who are kind of by nature, right? You're going to be more invested and involved in advocacy work. There may be some information that you know already, and hopefully some of it is new to you as well. A lot of people don't know about how disability is impacted by voting rights legislation, or how people with disabilities vote in Alabama that is different than how someone without a disability might vote. So you may have heard of some of these topics that I'm going to mention, but you might not know that much about how it actually affects people with disabilities. And like Kathy mentioned, I'm also a person with a disability and I vote. So it fits well. But let me actually click on this. If it would advance, that would be fun. Technology. Talk a little bit about federal and state election law first, just to kind of set the stage for all of this. So a lot of y'all have probably heard of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right? For our purposes, for what I'm going to talk about today, you have the right to have help when you vote. If you have specific types of disabilities that require assistance, right? In Alabama in particular, people who are blind do not have access to a Braille ballot. It doesn't exist, right? You cannot get a Braille ballot in Alabama. You can use the accessible voting machine, which has text to speech and speech to text and Braille keypad buttons. But if you were voting absentee as a blind person, you would need somebody to help you. If you decided not to use the voting machine, you would need somebody to help you. So that's an important piece that goes into this for people with disabilities. That is also true for people with different types of intellectual or developmental disabilities, or people who can't easily hold a pen, and people who cannot read and write, right? So that's what this helper person is for. The helper person cannot be your employer or a representative from your union. That second one is less common in our state. admittedly, right? But maybe for obvious reasons, right? Your employer can't help you because we don't want your employer influencing the way you vote one way or the other, right? That the person who is helping you should be someone that you trust. One of the situations that we find often with people with disabilities that I have experienced a lot in my career, both as a teacher and as an advocate, is that people with disabilities who live at home, especially young people, are often influenced by their caregivers on who to vote for and are not able to vote with complete privacy. That is unfortunate and frustrating because that's more of an advocacy issue than it is something we can legislate, right? Like we can't make parents not do that to their kids, right? And parents around the world try to instill kids with their values, right? And if their kids have different values, it can be very difficult and it can be an argument in the home. I mean, y'all are familiar with this, you know, from a maybe from a person without a disability perspective, but this can be even more of an issue with someone who is vulnerable in that way, right? Who needs care and attention from a loved one. So that's more of a self-advocacy issue, right? One of the things I try to teach people is make sure you stick up for yourself, that nobody can tell you who to vote for. Um, People can tell you all the time, what they think you should do, but you always have the right to decide that for yourself. That is easier said than done for a lot of people, especially people with disabilities who tend to be a more vulnerable group of the population anyway. The Americans with Disabilities Act, this is the one that most people have heard of, right? Because this is the thing that means that, like your local restaurant is wheelchair accessible, right? Or it's supposed to be. All this really says here for our purposes is that our elections have to be fully accessible. This is another thing that we know from experience is not as true as we'd like it to be, right? They have to be fully accessible. And then in practice, we'll go to a polling location and discover that the parking lot is gravel and people can't get across it, or it's nighttime and they didn't turn the lights on so people could see, or they didn't remove the bar from the door so people with wheelchairs couldn't get in, all sorts of things. And that's also part of what we do. We investigate those things. And we try to work with counties, especially poorer counties in particular, county election managers, to make sure that this stuff is taken care of before election day. And a lot of it is less expensive than you'd think, right? Sometimes if there's an issue with a parking lot or ground being uneven, you can get a mat from Home Depot and just put it over the gravel, right? People have this assumption, oh, we got to rebuild the whole building and tear it down and rip it apart. And most of the time that is not true, right? I mean, that does happen. We have a lot of old buildings in Alabama. And I would bet, although I can't be certain, that a lot of folks here vote in a church. And sometimes that church is old. And also sometimes, especially in rural counties, that is the main building where people can go to gather. So there are things that we can do to make places more accessible that aren't breaking the bank. And that's one thing I always try to tell county officials. It doesn't mean they can just decide, well, it's too expensive, so we can't make it accessible. It has to be accessible, but there are ways of doing it to ensure that it's both not breaking the bank and that everyone can get it on election day. Again, in practice, this doesn't always work out, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about that and the types of complaints that we receive in a minute, and then what you can do if you notice something that is inaccessible in your polling location. I talked a little bit about HAVA as the thing that funds my voting rights advocacy and among other things, right? But it also mandates that your polling place has to have a voting machine that you can use. This is the number one complaint we receive, that maybe the voting machine is there, but it's not turned on. And then if it is turned on, a lot of the time, people don't know how to use it or they weren't trained on it very much. And what we receive back most of the time from county officials is, well, nobody uses it. So that's why we don't spend that much time on it in training. And this is sort of a chicken and egg problem to some degree, right? Like if the machine is never on, if it's in the corner somewhere far away and no one knows how to use it, the people coming in there to vote are not going to know it exists. So one of the things that we've tried to do and that Madison County did in 2024 is put signage up explaining that there's an accessible voting machine and where it's located, and to not put it off, on Mars in the middle of nowhere in the polling location and to try to encourage integration into the rest of the space, which they should be doing anyway, right? Because that's one of the parts of accessibility that we don't think about very much, is that we don't want to be putting people with disabilities in a separate dark room far away from everybody else, right? Like we want to be able to vote along with the rest of our community in an integrated setting and have voting privacy and all of the things that we need. So the voting machine has to be accessible and provide full opportunity to vote. The voting machines are actually really cool. We have some good video demos of those, and I can link a couple of these as well. They're really neat. They have this little keypad that has Braille on it, so you can sort different questions by Braille. They have text to speech, speech to text, headphones. And they even have a straw attachment for people with mobility disabilities who need to blow their answers into the machine, which is very cool. I mean, they're about as comprehensive as a piece of technology gets, especially for this purpose, right? Because you can't account for every type of disability in the world, but they're pretty cool. They enable independence in a great way. One of my favorite things about the voting machines is that you can't forget to fill in a bubble or just decide to leave something unless you're doing it deliberately. And it also gives you a chance to check your answers. You can't screw up filling in the bubble. For those of you like me who remember the 2000 elections and hanging chads, I always think about that when I use the voting machine. And I know we don't have those anymore anyway, but I always think about that what if I fell in the bubble, but I didn't fill in the bubble all the way and then the machine doesn't see the bubble? This way you don't have to worry about it. Anybody can use this machine. And I am always trying to encourage everyone to go use it at your polling location. I would be polite and make sure that if there's a person with a disability using it or wanting to use it, you let them go in front of you. But what I try to encourage is more people using it so we get less and less feedback from county election officials saying, oh, no one uses this thing anyway, so why bother with setting it up or training people on it? And that way we get a good assessment from advocates like all of you, hey, it wasn't even on, or no one knew how to use it. I personally have had great luck at my polling location because there is an older gentleman that has worked there for, I think he told me 30 years, and he's always been the voting machine person. So when they got a new series of voting machines, he learned how to work the new ones. Used to be AutoMark, now it's Express Vote. He learned how to do that. I use it every time I go there. He knows my name. He's a very lovely human being, right? And I've seen him help other people. I've seen poll workers that are new be shocked about someone using the voting machine. And I'm fortunate that there is someone there who is training the new people on how to use it and how it works. Not every polling location is so lucky. And at some point, presumably, this lovely elderly gentleman who has been doing this for 30 years will not want to be a poll worker anymore, in which case someone else better step up and know how to use it, right? And they're supposed to be trained on these things, but training isn't always as comprehensive as we'd like. So it's good to get an assessment from the public and hear, hey, this wasn't working, or they didn't know how to use it, or it was still in the box, which I have heard before. So moving on a little bit from voting machines, I'll mention those again in a minute, though. The National Voter Registration Act just means that Alabama agencies must provide opportunities for you to register to vote, which we do, right? You can register to vote online, or you can register to vote by mail. I definitely recommend doing it online. It is easier, in theory, at least. The biggest hurdle for voter registration that I have encountered in my work tends to be voter ID. And that's not going to be as true for the general non-disabled population, although it is a barrier. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So absentee voting, and this will also cover a little bit in more depth too. And this might be an area where Larry may answer some questions as well about SB1 and the voting absentee voting lawsuit that the League of Women Voters was also a part of as well. So talk a little bit about what absentee voting is. It's just an option to vote from home and mail in your ballot. We do not have early voting in Alabama. Despite what John Merrill said years ago during the pandemic, we do not have anything resembling what other states would call early voting. You have to have a reason an excuse to vote absentee. These excuses are you can either be out of the county on election day, if you have a physical disability that does not allow you to travel to your polling place, and if you are a registered Alabama voter living outside the county for whatever reason. If you move to a permanent residence in a new space, you are supposed to change your voter registration. I talked to a lot of people in nursing homes and retirement living that don't know this, right? So sometimes they will have to go home to vote, so to speak. And in reality, that voter registration should be changed and updated to where they are residing. And if any of y'all decide to go out and do voter registration, that is something to know about people in institutions. That we want folks to not get in trouble for this and to be changing their voter registration, updating it to make sure it reflects where they are currently living. So just something to be aware of. So election officers can vote absentee, caregivers of people who are confined to their homes, and incarcerated people who have not been convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude. So the people in prison can vote absentee. We don't see it as often as we'd like. I think a lot of people don't realize that they don't always have their voting rights taken away if they're incarcerated. But it is worth recognizing. But these are the excuses, right, that you have to have in order to vote absentee, right? None of these include, I just don't feel like going to the polling location, or, I'm going to be busy that day. And early voting is designed to kind of stagger the election process a little bit, make sure people can send in a ballot for whatever reason, right? It doesn't have to be one of these reasons, but we have these specific rules in place. You can get something called a permanent disability absentee ballot. Its name is a bit of a misnomer. It is not exactly permanent. It is so that you can vote absentee for every election in a single year without having to reapply. A doctor has to certify that you have a permanent disability, and that doctor's signature has to be notarized for you to be able to get a permanent disability absentee ballot. As you might imagine, not many people do this. I have actually never encountered anyone who has done this. I'm sure they exist. I just mean in my work, I have not run into people who have done this. It is a pain. As a person who is currently trying to deal with a bunch of paperwork from vocational rehab and my doctor's office and the back and forth that goes on there, it is a pain enough to get everybody to sign the things that they're supposed to sign and sent to the person they're supposed to be sent to without also needing a notary public. So I've just not heard of this. Most people that I encounter with disabilities, or anyone who votes absentee, typically just votes absentee every election with one of the aforementioned excuses. But if you do want to apply, we can help you with that, right? It's other than the notarization, it's not actually that complicated. It's just that the doctor has to be in the presence of a notary, and that's part of the problem because, as we know, doctors are busy, right? So it's not just you that needs to have something notarized, and that's part of the struggle here. They don't make it easy, is what I'm getting at. In Alabama, we have a photo ID law. You have to present a valid photo ID to vote at the polls, and you have to submit a copy of the photo ID when applying for an absentee ballot. You are not, if you are voting absentee because you have a disability that impacts your ability to perform manual tasks, stand, walk, see, hear, or speak, a photo ID is not required. The problem with the photo ID that I have found, actually, I'll go back. The problem with the photo ID that I have found is that your average person, including our past Secretary of State and our current one, have talked about how easy it is to get photo identification. And I think to the average person who is middle class or has your average income, and they have a car and they have a house, or even if they're, a college student, working class, right? As long as they have transportation and the things we think of as, right, normal, right? Whatever, right? Like getting a photo ID is a pain, but not, that hard, right? And most people on this call probably have a driver's license, in which case, all done, right? You already have your photo ID. The issue that I run into here, and I'll give you an example that I like to give when I talk about this issue is when I was working as a peer advocate in independent living, I had a gentleman who lived in a group home. This gentleman got $30 a month to spend for himself out of his entire Social Security income allotment. The rest of it all went to the group home. So we had $30 to spend on any additional like snacks for himself if he wanted them, right? Like he got 3 meals a day and a bed, right? But he did not get like, you know, pretzels or granola bars or something that he could keep in his room. So he had $30 a month to budget somehow for that and for anything else he might need, right? So that alone did not cover the cost of us needing to figure out how to get down to the courthouse together to get his birth certificate. And we had to take accessible transportation, which also costs money going there and back, right? So we had to go get a copy of his birth certificate, and then we had to go get a photo ID that was not a driver's license, but he couldn't drive because he couldn't drive, but a non-driver identification card. And all of this added up to way more money than this gentleman got in a month. And we wouldn't have been able to do it if that wasn't part of it, and I couldn't help him do it. And this gentleman is a lot of people, right? Especially people who live in rural Alabama, especially people who live in the Black Belt. And not only do they have these barriers to income and cost, but transportation is a huge issue in Alabama, period. Birmingham has some accessible transportation. I won't call it great, but it exists. But if you get into rural Alabama, there's sometimes the DMV office is hours away, right? And how are you supposed to get there if you don't have a car, especially if you don't have a driver's license in the first place, right? And then if you're just going because you need to get the photo ID and you can't drive, you either need to find someone who's willing to do all this legwork for you. And that someone may also need to have a wheelchair accessible vehicle for you to get in and out of. And all of this equates to the fact that, or basically amounts to the fact that people with disabilities have a harder time in general conforming to these requirements, especially poor people with disabilities, of which we have many in our state, right? So when I encounter people who say, well, what's so bad about having a photo ID law? It's not so much that I would have a huge issue with the photo ID law if it were equitable. But the problem that we run into tends to be that it's a lot easier for some people to get than others. And for those people, it's very hard for them to imagine how it could possibly be difficult. And it is difficult for a lot of people. You can get a free voter ID card from the Secretary of State's office. What I have done before, especially when it's a person in an institution, Bryce Hospital is the example that I'll use. We had the state's voter ID van come out to Bryce Hospital and do all the work with the patients who wanted to vote to make sure they got free voter ID cards. That is possible, especially and more easy. I think it's easier to do if you're working with an institution that wants to help coordinate something like that, right? So that's a cool idea, and it's fun to be able to get that van to come out there and get those free voter ID cards. But those have specific eligibility requirements also. So it's just, and I'll mention those in a minute, but it's worth knowing. I want to spend a few minutes on some things you should know about voting with a disability in Alabama. And my favorite one, probably because I have a mobility disability, is you get to move to the front of the line. And poll workers, most poll workers know this, but some of them don't. Madison County started putting up signs to indicate this to people at our suggestion, partly because people don't always feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm hurting and I want to be able to, get to the front of the line. And there's some stigma about having a disability, especially one that you have mobility issues with. Some people feel like they should just tough it out, right? We've all met those folks. I have been those folks, stupidly. So it's worth mentioning that this is an option. If you're over 70, you can also ask. There is technically a voting booth time limit, and this is not something that I've literally never seen this come up in any polling location, but I include it when I talk to folks because it can legally come up. And some things that have not come up in the past have started to come up in recent years. And this hasn't, but it could be one of those things. So I want people to be aware of it. If you remain in the voting booth for longer than 4 minutes, the poll worker can ask you if you need any help. And if you want help, poll worker can help you and you can have 5 more minutes to vote. If you don't want any help, you get 1 more minute to vote. Again, I've never seen this come up once, no matter how, our state isn't hugely populous. It's not quite like those images you see on the news of people standing for 6 hours in line to vote, but that doesn't mean this couldn't happen. So it's worth mentioning to people. If there is no line, you can take as much time as you need to vote. I know that typically when I vote, it takes longer than 4 minutes, just as an example. I like to try to read very carefully what I'm looking at and spend time with it and make sure that I did it right and look over it. Some people might just, check box, go turn it in. But typically speaking, 4 minutes seems very short to me. So just worth knowing. This is a bit of, I think, more general information and things you may already know. You have the right to vote if you enter the line before 7 p.m. So if you get there, stay. If you make a mistake, you can ask for a new ballot. And if the poll workers tell you that you can't vote there, don't leave without casting a provisional ballot at the very least. Provisional ballots are a bit of a pain, and yours may or may not be counted. But it is worth mentioning that if you get stuck and they don't know where you're supposed to go vote, and they just know you're not supposed to vote there, at the very least, cast a provisional ballot because it is better than nothing. What I do want to talk at least a little bit about before I answer questions, if y'all have any, is if your polling place is not accessible in some way. And talked a little bit about voter ID, but just give me a second here. So the reason that I want to talk a little bit about polling accessibility is we have upcoming municipal elections in, let's see, I have the dates on the next slide actually, so I'll go to it in just a second, just so I make sure that I get them correctly. One of the things we need when we're talking about accessibility in polling locations is for the broader public to take our accessibility survey. And the reason is because we are not allowed by Alabama state law to go in there and monitor on election day itself. That can be, according to our state's laws, interference with ongoing election processes if we do not vote in those polling locations. So I can go and assess my polling location on election day, but that's just one of them. All of you, some of you may share a polling location, but probably a lot of folks on this call have different ones. If everybody on this call took that survey and let us know what the accessibility was like at their polling location, that's, something you're going to be doing anyway, right? Presumably is going to vote, and then taking 5 minutes to do this survey gives us a much better picture of what accessibility looks like in different polling locations in different areas and what the issues are that people run into. And then I can do something about it, right? I can go and I can talk to those county election managers and say, hey, we received some complaints about parking lot or the restrooms or the voting machine or whatever the case may be, and then work with them to resolve those. In my entire experience of doing this work, that has always been relatively amicable. Especially with county election workers. I've never really run into an instance where I've had to get threatening or talk about, the ADA in a sort of legal threat sense, right? That's never come up. People are generally very willing to work with you on something. Maybe they didn't realize that there was an issue, or if they did, they didn't really think about how it was an ADA violation. So people are pretty good in Alabama, at least the county election workers are. The judges are a bit of a different story sometimes, but the county election workers are very good about working with us to make sure that that complaints are addressed. I called a few of them in the November election in 2024 for kind of on the spot complaints, and they got somebody there right away to address the issue. I was on the phone with them while it happened. They were very quick to deal with the problem, and absolutely no issues on that front. But we won't know about those things unless people call us or take this survey. So that's part of the reason why I encourage everyone to do that. I put the QR code here as well too, and I'll put the link in the chat when I'm finished so you can see how to get to it. And maybe just bookmark it on your phone. And then next time you're at your polling location, you can just take it from your phone, and that would be really helpful for us to make sure that polling locations are accessible around the state. Briefly, because this is what we've got coming up this year, even though it is not a major fancy election year, everybody loves general elections, right? Because, you know, you have the president on the ballot, and there's news and coverage and more candidate coverage and ads on TV than you could ever possibly want. And so it is very difficult to not know about a presidential election, right? You'd have to be really tuned out of things to not know when it is. We need people to vote in municipal elections, maybe even more than national elections, because of how important these are to your local communities. All Alabama municipalities that are not previously listed, and this includes Birmingham and Mobile, are voting on August 26th of this year. So, and you can see the dates listed for other future upcoming elections for 26 and 27. But so we've got Dothan on, my bar is in the way. We've got Dothan on August 5th, and then everything else on August 26th. Tuscaloosa's municipal elections have already passed. So this is what's upcoming. There's a lot that we can do here to keep people engaged, and especially because a lot of these municipal elections are in places where we can try to figure out getting voters to the polls in terms of transportation, figuring out rides to the polls, and working with people who already are doing that work in different parts of the state. Birmingham, where I live, is very clearly gearing up for municipal elections, and the candidates are sniping at each other and bickering as they always do. But trying to get people engaged in municipal elections is really important, because I would argue that what your city government does and what is happening with you locally has much more potential to immediately impact your life, which is not to say that state and federal elections are not just as important. They are, of course. Like, we can see right now how much federal legislation and Congress trying to hammer out a budget is affecting the country. But you have the potential to affect much more change locally. And generally, local elections are less glamorous, right? So this is kind of why I wanted to talk a little bit about them today, and hopefully get people geared up for municipal elections, even though, like I said, they tend to get people less excited, but they are just as, if not more, important. Okay, do y'all have any questions for me?
So Nikki, I was thinking if you turn the share screen off, I was thinking
Yeah,
we could take maybe a couple of questions and then switch gears, and then at the end, after Melissa's talk, then we'll open it up for both.
good
So
idea. Yeah, we can
okay,
do that.
so has anybody got a question they want to ask right now? Two questions, and then we'll move on. And if there aren't any, then you can be thinking about questions.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for giving me the chance. And thank you all for listening to me talk for 40 minutes. I need water now.
This has been such an important presentation, and thank you so much. And I know we work together, the league and ADAP and Rev Up and other organizations are out there trying to basically trying to educate people about using the equipment, and so we appreciate everything that you're doing. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
with no questions, I'm gonna switch gears and now switch spotlights, I guess. Okay. All right. So Melissa, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Hopefully you all can hear me. And I think I've got my screen shared, hopefully. So it's good seeing everyone. Very excited to talk to you all today. Thank you so much for having me, Kathy, to the league. And Nikki, wow, just that was really insightful. I learned a lot just about disability voting and also voting in Alabama, just in general. Thank you. It was very interesting.
Hey,
To learn
Melissa,
that.
I was just going to tell you your share screen is showing your next slide. I don't know.
Oh, I couldn't tell if it was showing. I don't know how to turn this off. Let's see. Do I do?
I don't know.
No.
If you're good, I'm okay. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I have no idea what I just clicked on and now I broke it. So let me stop doing that and then I'll reshare it. It worked earlier. Always. Okay. Apologies for the tech glitch here, folks. Okay. You know what? Maybe I'll just do this. Nope, that's not what I want.
I think if that's PowerPoint, if you just go share your desktop and then click on that file and then do a full screen if it's PowerPoint.
Let's see what's happening here. Hold on. Okay. Sorry. I had it all ready to go and then I got confused by that weird setup. Okay, here we go. I think I got it again. That's what we're sharing. Okay. Hopefully you all see my screen again. And maybe this time you just actually see
Yes.
the slide instead
Now,
of,
if you click on that little view graph, yeah, next one. Yeah, that one.
That's what I did, and it gave me that weird setup, but whatever. Okay.
Okay, you're good.
At any rate, you all will just, oh wait, maybe I do this. There we go. How about that? Okay. So thank you all for having me again. And I'm very excited to talk to you all today about women's representation in Alabama and running for office in Alabama. So today I'm going to there we go. Just kind of the agenda for what our discussion will be. I really just kind of want to introduce myself, introduce who VRL is, go over some of our training agreements, talk a little bit about what the historical gender representation has been like in Alabama, and also go over one of our tools that we have, some of our research about charting paths and how that really transforms into our theory of change about running for office as you are and how you're perfect as you are to run for office and share your lived experience. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A. I do want to point out, I know that she's not from Alabama, but the representative on here, Ilhan Omar, she is a current VRLA alum, so we're very proud of her. Um, Great. So this is me. I'm Melissa. I'm the National Director of Field Strategy. Thank you for the intro earlier, Kathy. I have been with VRLA for, and you'll probably hear me say VRL and VRLA interchangeably. That's because they are our C3 and C4. So I technically work for both. I just wear my VRLA hat more often than what I do for VRL. And so that's what I mean if you hear me say that. So today, for Vote Run Lead, who are we? Vote Run Lead. We are first and foremost a values-led training organization. So we are focused on recruiting and training anti-racist, pro-democracy, intersectional feminist candidates. So women, non-binary candidates, gender expansive individuals. We really believe that they should run for office, that they should also serve as campaign managers. We believe in a more fully representative democracy, and we believe that people bringing their lived experiences and these shared values to these roles are what create that representative democracy and shared change. So just a little bit today. I hope that you all actively participate, whether that's just actively listening, maybe taking some notes. And then I'd love to see all your beautiful, shiny faces as much as possible while we're on video, especially across the miles. Really appreciate you joining. I'm joining you live from Colorado today, so it's stormy here, but excited to be in Alabama this afternoon. Please also try and stay present. This is a space for us to learn, a space for us to talk about gender representation in Alabama and how to be part of the solution here. And hopefully, we've got a short time together, so I'm just looking forward to sharing that information, having you all plugged in. And then just to put out a disclaimer, there might be some sensitive information shared here. Folks might otherwise feel vulnerable with what they're sharing. So please just handle each other and ourselves with care. I know our political environment is fraught enough as it is right now, and I have no doubt that this is a very safe and brave space, but we do like to open up all of our meetings with our general online training agreements. So who are we? Run 51. At Vote Run Lead, we have the Run 51 program. That is our moonshot goal to essentially create gender parity in all of our state legislatures. So we are focused on building, like I say, a reflective democracy at the state level. And why, like, what is it with, Run 51? Why are we focused on the states? And what kind of success have we had so far? So in 2018, Nevada was the first state to achieve gender parity in its state legislatures and has successfully held on to gender parity since the 2018 elections. In 2024, both Colorado and New Mexico also joined this distinction. So we now have three total legislatures in our country that do have full gender parity. I know also California made some gains. I think their Senate is at full parity now. And I think Alaska also made some gains. I want to say their House potentially. I might be misspeaking there, but there are a few places, but it's not common. And all these bright, shiny faces you see on the right side of the screen, these are our lovely alums that we've trained over the years. So, quick question. Maybe I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. Just pop this in the poll, perhaps. I'm sorry, pop it in the chat. But is anyone on here thinking about running for office? How do you feel about it? Is this something that you're thinking? Maybe I will someday, or oh my God, there's no way I will ever run for office. It's not for me. Maybe you've run for office before. Maybe you've decided, I don't know, I'm interested in it, but I'm gonna give it a few years. Don't be shy. Put your answer in the chat. Let's hear. Yeah, Brian, running for office. Yeah, who else? Anyone? Okay, not enough money to be competitive, too complicated. Past the age to run. Psh, there is no past age to run. Let me tell you that right now. I am here today to tell you, run as you are. Yeah, running for city council. Okay, amazing. Ran for school board twice. Yes, Rebecca. Okay, this is so fantastic. I'm so excited to hear this. Thank you all for sharing your political ambition. Um, we need people like you to run, and I'm about to explain why. So the problem, what is the problem? We've got this confidence gap. Um, and so time and time again, studies have shown that men regularly, routinely overestimate their abilities and their performance, while women will underestimate both of those. Um, but really, what we've found over the years and over longitudinal studies is that performances between the groups doesn't differ. For example, I've got a few different I can share with you. So Hewlett Packard, women applied for promotion only when they believed they met 100% of the qualifications listed for the job. And I'm sure this probably is familiar to anyone that's ever looked for a job, anyone that's ever talked to anybody that's looking for a job. Oh, I'm not qualified. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, I can't, oh, I don't meet every single bullet there. Um, but men were happy to apply. This is that same Hewlett Packard example, okay? Men were happy to apply when they thought they could meet 60% of the job requirements. At Hewlett Packard, and in study after study, the data confirm what we instinctively know. Underqualified and underprepared men don't think twice about leaning in. Overqualified and overprepared, too many women still continue to hold back because they feel like that confidence gap is there. Another thing is that women don't ask. So Linda Babcock, a professor of economics at Carnegie Mellon, she's also the author of a book called Women Don't Ask, has found that in studies of business school students, men initiate salary negotiations 4 times as often as women do. And when women negotiate, they ask for 30% less money than men. I probably don't also need to tell people about the wage gap, right? So like these, and the problem is the confidence gap. But that's why Vote Run Lead exists, because we believe that you are perfect as you are, to run as you are, to serve as you are, to inform a reflective democracy. I also want to take a break because I realize that there's like men on this call. I want to be very clear, this isn't like a men bashing session. We're just trying to delineate and show like how and why these differences exist, because they do. And the problem, like, we can't ignore them, and there's some very real studies as to why they exist. I just want to be clear. This isn't meant to, um, upset any men. We're not speaking ill of anyone here. Um, okay. So women are 51% of the population, but they only hold 34% rather of our seats in state legislatures. Just let that sink in for a minute. 51% to 34%. I'm not a math major, but I do know that 51 is bigger than 34. I can say that much. Um, the map in front of you shows the concentration of women in state legislatures, um, proportionally. So, or like how what the current representation is. The darker the color, the purple, that's where the representation is. So you see Nevada with its big representation. A lot of these western states, so Colorado, New Mexico making their gains. Alabama is sitting over here. That sad little 16, 19%. So we're over there. Um, definitely got a ways to go. Uh, but however, in Alabama, still there's only 11.4% of the state senators and 21% of the state representatives that are women. Again, 51, here it says 51.7. So 52% of Alabama's legislature. Oh, sorry, my light just went off. That's going to happen. 51, almost 52% of the state's population is women. Yet we're sitting here at an average of like, what, 16% representation in the country? I mean, in the state right now, in the state legislature. That's pretty woeful. Women of color are even more underrepresented in Alabama's legislature. There's 8.6% of the state Senate seats and 10.5% of the state representative seats. And you can see here kind of some of the breakdowns on this slide. That's what I'm showing you here. You've got a little graph over here showing you like who's underrepresented, like the breakdowns of like ethnic groups. I'm sorry, not ethnic groups, but just demographics. So like AAPI, there is currently no representation for AAPI in either the House or the Senate in the state legislature. Black women, again, severely underrepresented. Latina women, there's no one, no Latinas in the state Senate. Um, there's severe underrepresentation in the House. Men, overrepresented. I mean, we can see that again by math, right? Like we know 52% and 16%, not the same. So the other part's going to be made up by men. Even just white women are severely underrepresented. Women in general, women of color, we already know are underrepresented. So it's time to make a change. Oh, we just did that. Oh, well, this is a little bit more of a breakdown. So we were talking about like the 52% of the population and the underrepresentation of Black women. But this is just a slide to show you that like even Black women at 15% of the state's population really only average here at about 9% across the board of representation in the state legislature. So how can you fully have a functioning and representative democracy? People that show up to work every day knowing what it feels like. um, Actually, I'm going to go back to this slide for a second. People that show up to work every day knowing what it feels like either to be a single parent and or maybe be the teacher that's worried about like the kids that come to your classroom that know that they're going to school and that's the only place they're going to get a square meal. Folks that are worried about how do I pay my rent, or I can't pay my groceries, or I'm worried my power is going to be shut off this week because I live paycheck to paycheck. So, how are we going to get people that are like speaking truth to that and able to legislate and understand what the what the solution is and the lived experience if the people that we're continuously electing don't have that kind of background. So that's what I mean when I say representative democracy. And if you look at far, how far underrepresented a lot of these demographics are, that's really why I'm kind of hammering that home. Like, who's going to be able to speak to the plight of like the indigenous community if no one in the legislature is indigenous? Who's going to represent those Black women? Who's going to represent those Latina women in the Senate if no one's there to speak for them? Exactly. No Latino women. So, at this current pace that we're moving, it's going to take Alabama more than 100 years to reach gender parity in its state legislature. I'm not going to be alive in 100 years. I'm not. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to see this. Unless science does something miraculous, I'm going to go out on a limb and say no one else on this call is going to be around in 100 years either. But who knows? But what really this boils down to is we're not going to see gender parity in Alabama in our legislature in our lifetime if there's no change, like no intervention. We keep doing what we're doing. We don't try to make more of a concerted effort to elect and recruit women and gender expansive individuals to run for office. So this is from a tool. This is actually from our website, womensmajority.org. If you go there, you can play around. I'll show you some more slides. But there's some like these buttons over here you can play around and kind of toggle to see what the difference is going to be. If women changed and they met like our current, like the average. So right now, for example, this is showing that Alabama's current run rate for women in open seats is at 65%. That is below the national average of 69%. So what would happen, you can go, oh, I just clicked it. But what would happen if we went to the womensmajority.org and you could click around on some of these buttons and just play around, see what's going to happen to the state legislature? What happens if suddenly women are running at the same average rate? What does that do to change the years? What happens if they win, like the best case scenario? Like right now, women winning in open seats is severely under what the national average is. And then also incumbents. So you can just play around with this data, and it's a really neat tool just to kind of visualize how you can change the makeup of your own democracy. Okay, so what does this mean? The solution is you. I've been saying run as you are, but what does this mean? You are the expert of your community. You are the one that's going to make our democracy reflective and impactful. Have what it takes to run, or you can help a woman run and win. And that's what we do at Vote Run Lead. We recruit and train women and gender expansive individuals to run for office or serve as campaign managers because we do believe in that reflective democracy. Training and building this more diverse national talent pool is really what's going to give us like the ability to draw from. We believe in building the bench. We believe in building the pipeline. I'm going to show you actually this next slide is about what happens with intervention. So what does that mean? If we build the pipeline, we build the bench, we think about what succession planning is, then we can make a bigger difference in Alabama. We can make a difference a lot sooner. And then with intervention, Alabama could actually achieve gender parity in 26 years. Again, no mathematician here, but 26 is significantly less than 100, and I feel a lot more confident about my odds to be around in 26 years versus 100 to potentially see this in my lifetime. And what changes? So basically, changing these, if women ran for every open seat, so best, that's what that is. Changing this to the best case scenario and changing it to women winning in those seats. Why? Why did we move that to best from average? Because we believe that with the right intervention, with the right training, these women will run. They will win. With the campaign managers that we're training, that we're recruiting, that they will win. And they will run these races and they will help to achieve these best case scenario outcomes in order to move the needle further for Alabama. So, open seats in Alabama. In 2022, and I apologize, I don't have the 2024 data down here. When I showed you the earlier slides with the national kind of representation by state legislatures, that was updated with our 2024 election data. And unfortunately, I don't have that listed here. I'm sorry. However, in 2022, there's a real big disparity here. 9 men ran unopposed in open seats. And so what we know is that when women run, they win at the same rate as men. So that's almost 10 seats, right? 9 seats. So here, out of 26 seats, that's almost 1/3 of those seats that were unopposed. And that's opportunity space. That's what we're calling that. Um, Men ran in every single open seat. There wasn't a woman that ran unopposed anywhere in the state legislature races in 2022. And in 17 of those races, men and women ran together. So again, we believe that you're the leader that we need, and that's why we call our training philosophy Run As You Are, because you have the capacity, you have the skills, you have the knowledge, you have the experience. You are perfect as you are. You have the living experience and the knowledge and the depth and breadth to serve as an elected official. So looking at the state, like several state legislative election cycles, like the incumbency advantage is super real. And when incumbents run as for reelection, they typically win. However, there's a lot of turnover in those seats. So within the past 3 cycles, 87% of those seats have been new. So that means that people are either being appointed and running or like running for reelection after appointment, because that is a way to be, you don't have to actually run for office. You can be appointed to office. Um, and then you can run as an incumbent on when you're running for reelection or for election for the full seat past your appointment. But there's a lot of turnover in those seats, and that's why we think challenging those as open seats is very important. And I'm not saying go out and challenge your like super popular, everybody loves them, they're very effective, they're your speaker, perhaps, I don't know, just someone big. Um, I'm not saying you have to go out and run against like, the powerhouses right away, but there's way to make inroads. There's ways like there are communities that are struggling that need people to represent them. And in order to have a more representative democracy, it's also about like having people on the ballot that look like me, people on the ballot that look like you, people on the ballot that represent what you believe and look like what you believe and that you believe in, that you feel like, I think I understand that person. They look a lot like me. I think they understand what I'm going through. Like, so that's what it is. And then when there's around like, and this is a national statistic, but when there's like 1,000 or more open seats in state legislatures and we're not running, then that means that there's people out there that are missing opportunities to help create that more reflective democracy. So our charting paths to a women's majority, this is just simply showing here some of like visually some of the numbers I've already shared. Men running for 92% of the open seats. That's a lot. Not quite 100, pretty close, right? And then again, you saw on that stat about the 2022 elections for Alabama, you didn't have any women that ran unopposed. It was all men that either ran unopposed or ran against a woman. So these white dots up here are showing you that men ran 92% of the time. Now, we flip it. Women run only 69% of open seats. So we'll say 7/10, right? That still leaves like a 30% of open room. That's still opportunity. Exactly. So 30% with no seats of women running, only men running, 1 out of 3 seats. That's a big opportunity for change. That's a big opportunity for reflection. That's a big opportunity for being a messenger. That's a big opportunity for representing your community and being that representative democracy. And sometimes it's just, I'm sure there's people here that have said, I'm tired of waiting for a person to come up with the right solution, so I must have to do it myself. It's kind of how running for office works, especially when we want you to run as you are. And that's why the confidence gap is so debilitating sometimes, and we work so hard to come across that and move through that because we do need people to speak their truths. And again, when women run, women win. They win in the equal amounts. They are successful about the same rate as men. It's about a 50-50 split. We just need to get those women in those seats. We need to get women and gender expansive individuals there. So why the state legislature? You might be asking yourself this. Why is it that Run 51 and Vote Run Lead is focused so specifically on the state legislature? Well, first and foremost, it's where the fight is. From family leave to voter access to disability rights to all the top issues, they're being fought in our state legislatures right now. Like, these are the bills that impact our daily lives, even more than what happens on the federal level. They're democratic laboratories, right? So, given the frequency and the size of their campaigns, these legislative races are laboratories to run when lose, evaluate, and quickly pivot or experiment again. So, things that happen locally are going to impact what happens nationally, what happens even more locally in your like municipal races and your county races and your school board races. Why state legislatures? Also because it busts the myth that women can't get elected. There's living proof on this phone call that women can get elected. I know that. I work with women all day that have been living proof of this. There are so many visible and powerful roles like majority leaders, speakers, chairs. Women can occupy them, show their electability, their viability, and their influence. It's also probably no secret that women govern differently. They solve for hyperpartisanship and legislative gridlock. Um, you know, I've got a lot I could add to that, but I won't. I won't add commentary. But I mean, there's different leadership styles, and also when you expand your candidate pool for that, then you expand opportunities to learn about different leadership styles and what governs those changes. It's a stepping stone to bigger office. So, state legislatures, about 30% of the women in Congress in 2021 had previously served as state legislators. So we believe that to create this more reflective democracy, as I've said, it's not just running for office, it's also managing a campaign. We need strong people behind the scenes. Not everyone wants to be the one that's the candidate. I'm a campaign kid at heart. I love doing the strategy behind the scenes. So, like, I know there's other people out there. A lot of your perpetual organizers or lifelong activists that just don't necessarily want to be the ones making the policy. They want to be out there advocating for the policy. These are the people you need as your campaign managers. This is just a plug for our coaching that we do at Vote Run Lead. This is a resource that we offer coaching one-on-one with both our candidates and campaign managers. We're actually relaunching that in the summer, starting in June. And so I encourage you all to please go to our Vote Run Lead headquarters. Go to vrlhq.org. This is where you'll sign up for more information. So if you're interested in learning about coaching opportunities, learning about future training opportunities, if you're already running, if you're running a campaign and you need some help or you want some guidance on how do I put together my budget, if you want to do a quiz on what your leadership style is and how to manage effectively, if you want to know about putting together your field plan or calculating a win number for the first time, all of that information is available on this. There's videos, there's worksheets, there's resources. Um, there is a state-specific hub. There's not anything particular to Alabama at the moment. However, there you can search by like fundraising, field stuff, basically any element of a campaign, even just management, managing the candidate as a campaign manager or the candidate, how do you manage your family and your volunteers? So a lot of information available in there. And with that, I am ready to turn it back over to a few questions. And yeah, thank you.
If you'll take your screen down, I'm gonna make it gallery view so we can see everybody. And Nikki will spotlight you too. Fine, if I can figure out where it is. Let's see. There you are. Okay. So
I'm catching up with the comments over here, and definitely, yeah, poor West Virginia, Nikki. Yeah. Poor few states.
So I was just going to ask you if you could, Melissa, just to kick this off, can you, I guess the local elections are kind of, that's where a lot of people would start this year if they, as far as being able to create change in their communities, and those are nonpartisan. I was just wondering if you have any, if you'd like to talk about, as far as running for office, some people probably don't even know a lot of times what the first steps are as far
Exactly.
as.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kathy. So again, I would encourage you to go to our HQ. There's two resources on there, one called 90 Days of Action and another one called 20 Steps to Political Action. And there's a lot that you can do to get involved. And I also want to make a plug real quick because I know, Kathy, when we were talking prior to this meeting, one of the things that you said to me that really stood out was if if someone's running unopposed, you can't hold a candidate for them. So that's another reason to have someone, right? People like choice too. People want to hear from other people. But at any rate, I'll go back to the original question. Uh, to get involved, like I think first and foremost, it becomes with like knowing your why. Like, what are you passionate about? What is it? Is it, um, you say like, well, it's my community. Okay, well, what about your community? Is it that you want it safe? Okay, drill down. What is it about the fact that you want it safe? Are you worried about, potential drugs on the playground? Are you worried about like violence? Are you worried about wanting more public safety? So like really hone down and find your why. And then you're going to want to try to figure out like who deals with that. And that might be someone on your city council. That might be someone at your county commission. Your city and counties have a bunch of boards. You can join a board. There's other ways to be involved without running for office or jumping in to manage a campaign. You can get involved. I would say go to your meetings. If you're interested in like school funding, go to your school board meetings. If you're interested in learning about like zoning or why are they putting that building up there? Like there's homes in that community. Great. Go to a planning commission meeting. Figure out what's going on. Set up meetings with your local elected officials. Talk to them, engage with them, tell them what interests you, ask them where they stand on interests on matters that interest you. And then you're going to want to like kind of generate this dialogue. You can get involved with there's a lot of great groups locally that either get involved in local races. I'd be happy to suggest some. I could really go any direction right now, but I would say just like email me, call me. Um, yeah. And then make sure that you have my information in the chat. But I can help connect you with organizations. So, like, if gun violence or gun safety is something that you're concerned about, you could reach out to Moms Demand Action and say, hey, who are you supporting in this local election? It's important to me that they align with my values. And then it really goes down to values alignment as well. So, what matters to you? Who's doing that? And how can you get involved with them? And it can be as simple as like, I want to come and help you like stamp envelopes, or I want to come make a few phone calls, or really just reach out to a campaign, tell them what your interest is. And especially if you're giving them free time, then they should not turn you away. There's never enough time, money, or people on any sort of campaign. So, whatever you can do to be a part of that, I would encourage you to reach out. And then if you're looking to run yourself, again, there's so many groups like the league, like your state and local parties that can help you, like orgs like us, like Vote Run Lead, that have the resources available. So we can help point you to trainings. If we don't have a training that's imminent, we can make sure to plug you in with a partner that has training, in addition to the resources that we have on our HQ.
Thank you. That helps to kind of scope this out as far as where you can start and plugging in. And one of the things, I guess I'm asking this question because I'm not seeing any hands raised. If you want to come off, if you want to raise your hand, after I ask this question. One of the things that I think about is Adelaide mentioned about the fact that your Social Security benefits could be affected if you're running as a person with a disability. Do you have any ideas on how a person with a disability could get around this, or is that something that maybe we need to talk to, figure out how to have an alternative campaign strategy that doesn't require a ton of money?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, like if you're running a campaign, like you shouldn't be focused on like what you have financially to bring to the table. I mean, it's great that folks have um, that they can fund their campaigns, but honestly, like you want people to be able to like you're running because you want people to engage with you. You want them to endorse you. You want them to contribute to you. Like it's their show of support to you by either contributing to you financially or with their time, etc. Um, as far as like from a technical standpoint, I haven't heard anything about like anyone being like impacted necessarily like by the system for running that way. But I would say that the parties for sure have a lot of great resources on navigating those. And then also, like, if it comes to filing, like compliance or other issues with the system, talk to the clerk. Maybe the clerk's the problem. I don't know. I'm not trying to start problems with anybody, but I'm just saying, like, these people are resources. So, like, the county clerk, like your voting offices, like your election offices, these are like career people that are there because they believe in like the system. They believe in how things work. They believe in, providing fair access to everyone. So they're there actually to be your ally and help you. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local voting offices for help if you do have problems navigating the system, or if you're unsure how to fill out a form, or if you're unsure like who you need to be in contact with. I would absolutely encourage you all to, if you are running, don't try not to manage your own campaign. That might not be possible for some of the state and local stuff. You can always find a trusted friend, trusted colleague, neighbor, family member, peer, someone from your church group, etc. There's so many places to draw from. And then as far as like the financial aspect of it, like a lot of local races aren't going to cost too much money. So, really like figure out what you need, right? Like your first buy isn't going to go be 750 yard signs. If you're like, I'm starting a campaign, here's my yard signs. I just bought 1,000. That's not your campaign plan. If you are interested in running, I would encourage you to look at past expenditures from similar races to give you an idea. And then again, talk to people who've either run for similar offices, that exact office, the people that are in that office, or someone that's done something of a similar size, so that you have someone to draw from and their experience can guide you. It can be a lonely experience running for office, and I'm not saying that to be scary. It's just a reality of it. It's a very different world, and it does require a lot of support. And so make sure that you're asking people for that. I know a lot of consultants that are like, the first thing I would say a therapist, a campaign manager, and a compliance consultant. So that's basically if you got those, then you're good to go.
So, so one of the things that the league is looking at doing this year for the municipal elections is we are limited in our capacity because we're all volunteer, but to take around 50 different municipalities and really focus a little bit more than that, but to take the municipalities that we're focused on, get the everything loaded up, and then give the candidates an opportunity to support to answer the questions that we have, and then we put it out there basically as a resource for the voter. But in these smaller elections, it could be a really valuable way for a candidate to get their face out there, because it's a place that we're putting the full ballot out there, and we're giving the candidates an opportunity to answer the questions and put that information out there. So, and we're nonpartisan. We're aren't supporting or opposing anyone, but it really would. We're kind of thinking, Melissa, that things like this digital outreach might even be for people who don't have a lot of money, or people who are in rural areas that maybe yard signs are 5 miles apart. This could be a way for people to get their name out there.
Absolutely.
So, maybe there's strategies like that that could be not your typical yard sign and billboards, point people to a central place where people are doing it digitally rather than in a physical, something that might cost quite a bit.
Absolutely. Like, you know what works best with your community. And maybe, especially in some of these rural communities, it's advertising on the radio and being on during a farm report. Like, that's not unusual at all. That's actually a very effective way to get in front of people. So there are some non-traditional campaigning tools out there. And again, that's why I would encourage you to go to Vote Run Lead, the VRLHQ.org, VRLHQ.org, because
Yeah.
that's going to have all those resources on there. And again, you can talk to a coach. I'd be happy to connect you with anyone, be a resource myself. I put my information in the chat. And I will say a plug for the League of Women Voters, their Vote 411 for your voter guides. Like, even as a personal voter, if someone doesn't fill those out, I'm just like, I'm not even gonna look them up. And maybe that's the wrong way to go about it, but that's how important I really think it is to participate in things like this and include your information. If people want to know about you and you're running for office, don't limit yourself in how you share that information with them. So, like, the resources and the opportunities that the league provide are critical because they do their best. Like, it really is like a civic engagement tool to bring these candidates to the community and engage them so people have an opportunity to talk to them. And don't miss out on that. Don't say, oh, it's another piece of paper to fill out, I don't want to do it, because you're probably missing out. I mean, you're definitely missing my vote.
Thank you. Um, I was I was also wanting to ask Nikki a question. If people are like this past week, we got the news that this one county or one municipality, I think it was Greenville, but I'm not. I may somebody needs to correct me if that's not right. But that they had consolidated all their polling places into one location because of ADA noncompliances, and so those are the kind of things that I guess that was based on someone previously finding an issue with the polling places. Um, I'm just wondering if is there do you I'm wondering how do we get in front of this where we don't just find out about a ADA noncompliance before the election, not waiting until the day of election. Are you doing surveys or anything with any of these communities ahead of time, or is I know that's been something we talked about, but I don't know how to make that happen right now.
I try to work as much as I can with the communities ahead of time and the election managers ahead of time. The biggest hurdle that I have personally found in Alabama are the probate judges. It is very dependent upon the area's probate judge, and none of them, perhaps understandably, although I find it frustrating, want to admit that there is a single solitary problem in their entire area that they cover with accessibility, whether it be training or individual polling locations. And then, of course, later we find out all of these places had XYZ problems, and now we're consolidating it to one place. And that is a problem for people who are voters who don't have easy access to transportation. My goal is never for a polling location to close. I think most of the time this can actually be resolved with some education of the probate judges and the county election officials on options that they can use even solely for election day that would make something that is not accessible or something that is an ADA violation easily become compliant, that they just don't know about, and they are hesitant to ask for help on the subject for fear that they will be represented as a probate judge who allowed these violations to go on. It is difficult to get past that point of pride with people. And which is to say that I am positive that if you were looking really hard with a magnifying glass, that there would be something in very close to, if not all, polling locations in the state, right? Like that. So the reason I say that is not to necessarily disparage those county election officials who are working really hard on that. Some of them do and some of them don't. But a lot of the time, I think they just don't know how to resolve it, don't know what to do, and then eventually will give up and consolidate polling locations. And we don't want that, right? Because we don't want people to have more trouble getting to their polling location than they already do. So from my perspective, a lot of this could be resolved with working with these folks ahead of time, which I have found in my experience, the county officials are much more willing to do than the probate judges are. And that is a hurdle that is difficult to leap over. Now, you and I both did it with the probate judge in Madison County, and he was actually wonderful in helping me train the poll workers there and the election, not the poll workers, the county election officials in Madison County on all of these issues. So some of it depends on framing, right? Being able to talk to these probate judges and say, okay, our goal is not to go in here and come back with a report on everything that you did wrong. Our goal is to make sure that everyone can get into these places and we can help your employees figure out how to make this possible without you spending the entire county budget, but I think some are more amenable to hearing that than others. And that is sort of an ongoing problem.
So you just made me think of another office that's really important for people with disabilities and all of everyone who's an ally, is the county commission. Because when Nikki and I met with the probate judge about the audit that he said that they were doing, and I asked for a copy of it, he said I would have to go talk to the county commission. And so, at least the county commission funded it, but how many county commissions are out there not funding an ADA audit? And that's the kind of thing, when you start thinking about why local elections matter, county is not in 2025, but it is next year. And so if you're looking for a place to really make a difference, and have people that are going to represent your interest, you're looking at local this year, you're looking at county, all the way up to state. And then next year, you're also got your representatives, the federal offices for the House of Representatives and one of the Senate offices. So there's a lot of opportunity.
There is. And I think, and I know you've been to a couple, my other recommendation for folks is attending the state's voting advisory board meetings that happen quarterly. And they get rescheduled all the time. So it's frustrating. If I were to take the data from my accessibility survey to the voting advisory board, which I have done before, they will tell me to take it to the judges, which I also do. But that doesn't mean that valuable information cannot be gleaned from the state advisory board, and they have a representative from the Secretary of State's office there. And it is important that they hear from people that are not just board members. So I am endlessly trying to convince people to attend those if they are able. The problem is, of course, they happen in the daytime on like a Tuesday in Montgomery, so it's not easy for people who are working to get down there. But one of the things I've been trying to do lately that I think we might actually get accomplished is to get a live stream going of those advisory board meetings that will still be in person, but doing a Zoom live stream option for members of the public who want to join. So that's a current goal. You can find out a lot about how the state's regulations on elections filter down to the counties and the county election officials from attending those meetings. And there's a lot of useful information there if you're thinking about how to get in contact with your local officials and how to make sure that your polling locations are more accessible. And they are also very open to hearing about this topic. I will give them credit on that front. So I just wanted to add that they talk about sunshine being the best disinfectant, but in this case, it's more that just I don't think people know how a lot of this stuff works, and going and seeing how it works and attending with other people who are also learning is really useful for getting more involved in these issues in the state. So I definitely recommend that attending those. You can sign up on the state of Alabama's, it's like the government of Alabama's website. I can try to find the link real quick, to receive notices of meetings. And those meetings take place under the Open Meetings Act, so they have to put those up there. And it may not just be voting. There may be a whole bunch of stuff that you might find, hey, I'd like to attend those. And they're open to the public. Now, do they typically see members of the public? No, but that's why we should show up, right? So that's kind of one of my recommendations for people who are trying to get more involved in this work is definitely get to know those folks. Have them know your face. And then when you come there asking questions, they'll trust that you really care about this topic. Because like Melissa said, to most people involved at the county or state level, clerks, etc., do this because they're passionate about doing the work, that they got into this because they believe in the system. They believe that it works and they want it to work where it's not working. They are not the same as politicians trying to win in an election year and pandering, right? So
Yeah.
it does help for these folks to get to know you for when you have questions or ideas. They're more willing to listen if they know you already.
Yes. And thanks to Nikki, I went to the last one, and it was just interesting because I think they started realizing that the league wasn't just a bunch of far left liberals. They actually, I don't think they knew what political leaning I had. They couldn't, if they could tell, they didn't say. And I wasn't going to say either. So Adelaide, you had your hand up.
So, couple of things. One, during the presidential election this last time, St. Clair County had to leave their polls open later than 7 o'clock because they got to the polling places across the St. Clair County area that on election day and discovered that all or most of their ballots did not get printed on the back when they were originally sent out, so to the polling places. So, and then just towards the middle of this month, Alabama Rev Up has lost yet another member of its group. Katie Toro decided to move back to Florida. So,
that is an organization that was just created that, it's welcome to people with disabilities, but also our allies. That's something we need to put out some more information on that. I was going to say for the St. Clair, there is another organization, 866 Our Vote, that the league is a partner with that organization, and I know they got called on that, and that the people that were in the boiler room that day, basically the lawyers went toe to toe with the state of Alabama to force them to keep the polls open longer. And so I think that's where all of us working together can make a difference. I did want to.
And then I found out over the weekend that Dr. Graham Sisson is fixing to retire next month.
Yeah.
So
we need to definitely, I guess that Nikki, we need to get back and call a Rev Up meeting. So I had one more thing. Thank you, Adelaide. So I was wanting to say, if there's anybody here that is interested in school systems, the elections in August are also in many locations are electing their school board representatives. And I know we were getting some of the Read Freely community to join us today. And so I wanted to say, all of these city council and school board, these are opportunities to try to fight back in elected office, and even just to run for office could really help us bring some of these issues and elevate so that we can see who it is that is what their beliefs are, because that it's so critical that we start having these open and frank discussions so that who's being elected and have a chance to make sure that they represent your values. And so with that being said, I think I don't see any other questions, and I wanted to thank the presenters again today, and say we've got on the third Monday of June, we're having our next next voter skills training, and hope everyone will go ahead and sign up for that. As soon as you get the league voter, we send out that's when we send the notice on that, and we also have it on our Facebook. So thank you all, and Melissa and Nikki, thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. This was great. And Melissa, it was awesome to hear your presentation. I know a little bit about your organization, but it was great to hear it all. So it was nice to
Likewise.
co-present with you.
Very
All
much.
right.
Likewise. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Stopping the recording.
Bye.